Carney has been on a diplomatic flurry. It's sort of pitiful, the countries he's meeting with and making huge announcements over tiny little things, countries with a sliver of a population. I think it was Barbados the other day. I have nothing against Barbados. I've had the pleasure of going there. But it's smaller than a city. It's less than 250,000 people. That's not exactly a replacement for a trade deal with the United States. Neither is Mexico. I'm afraid neither is Indonesia. If you look up all these countries, we have tiny amounts of exports. But this is, I think, Mark Carney trying to show that, sure, he doesn't have a trade deal with Trump. And sure, he seems to be on the wrong foot with Trump. But, he's putting together a coalition of, I don't know, a Lilliputian coalition. He may not get Snow White, but he'll get the Seven Dwarves. I don't know. I'm not sure who's buying it. He wasn't even invited to Trump's meeting to deal with Ukraine, and Canada has been one of the largest funders. But yesterday, Carney took a break from talking about diplomatics and even trade deals and started talking about a vision for a new kind of economy. Now, whenever a politician talks about a new kind of economy, hold on to your wallet, because odds are it's not a new idea at all. Odds are it's just a repackaged version of socialism. And that's not really that surprising coming from the former director of the World Economic Forum, which, as we know, looks capitalist on the outside. I mean, Larry Fink of BlackRock is on their board, but it's actually a socialist endeavor, sort of hijacking capitalism, taking it away from shareholder rights towards stakeholder rights, and replacing the free market with a managed market. So from the very beginning, you should be on guard about Mark Carney. Here he is in New York, and I want to play 3 full minutes of him describing what he wants to do, not just to Canada's economy, but to the world's economy. And when we're done watching these 3 minutes, I'm going to call upon Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation to help me, A, understand what the heck this means, and B, figuring out how it's going to be implemented, if at all. Okay, enough preamble. Take a look at this 3-minute craziness from Mark Carney.
The way I'm going to organize my thoughts, 3 points, 4 points actually, around building that system, financial system for our grandkids, again, drawing on the intervention of the managing director and the Secretary General earlier. First thing we need is to recognize that we need to use scarce dollars to the maximum effect. This isn't just about bigger volumes, it's about using scarce public dollars to maximum effect. And that is catalyzing financial instruments using risk mitigation tools to better allocate risk between the public and private sector. I will just refer for speed to the agenda of the Private Sector Investment Lab and what the World Bank has been doing on risk management. The second point is crowding in institutional capital through originate to distribute models. There's a lot of words there. What it basically means is recycling the balance sheets of our international financial institutions. So they are there catalyzing the new lending. Once it matures, it's parked off to other holders that can hold it for the long term, and it's all about action, new action at the MDBs. The third point is strengthening the structures, processes, governance of the institutions. To put it into plain words, the shareholders should be looking at key performance indicators that are directly tied, of course, to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also absolute volumes of capital that are moving. And in some cases, it's not about lending. It's actually about technical assistance. It's making capital flow possible. So all of those activities that catalyze in flows towards the SDGs. I will reference the work that has been done and needs to be completed on a cross-border carbon market, which could close 1/3 of the climate finance gap between now and 2035. And I will also just associate myself with the framework that President Ramaphosa did outline for the G20, which is more comprehensive than what I've just said. Last point I'll make is that at the G7, there were a few instruments that were launched that build on some of the general points that I just made. Billions of dollars in new financing through the IADB and the Caribbean Development Bank, and a structure where a number of countries came together called SCALED, which is Scaling Capital for Sustainable Development. The point of this, it's measured in billions, but really the point is it's a template. It's a template for putting in place those general points that I made. It has, as its name suggests, an ability to scale. And if I may close on this, Chair, there is an enormous gap. We know that. But the gap in terms of financial technology and the solutions has closed. The question is whether we're going to deploy them and scale.
I understood 4 words of that. He said cross-border carbon market. That's another way of saying a carbon tax. The rest of that was fog, was what George Orwell would call duck speaking. I'm so frustrated. That's the 3rd or 4th time I've watched that now. Let me bring in our dear friend Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, be honest. Did you understand that? Or tell me, did you understand any of it? And you're a smart guy. All you do is look at budgets and government spending. I don't think you're a PhD, but literally all day, this is what you study. What in God's green earth did he say for 3 minutes?
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm having a hard time really breaking down what he said. And Ezra, before I came on the show, I watched this clip a number of times trying to figure this out. I mean, the most concerning thing to me is a couple things. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 things right off the bat. So number one is, why are politicians, bureaucrats even kind of discussing what could be, I don't know if the right term is remake, but of the financial system, right? To go back to your introduction off the top here, Ezra, there's really only 2 ways that an economy operates: with freedom or with force, right? And this is the tale as old as time. Okay, that has been the fight throughout the millennia, throughout the centuries, right? It's either freedom or it's force. It's either individuals in the marketplace deciding where to buy things and produce things, or it's through government dictate and government fiat. So that's number one, is just the big alarm bells ringing there. But number 2, as you mentioned, Ezra, what was it? The cross-border carbon market. I flag in the exact same thing you're flagging, Ezra. And look, we already know that the global, international organizations, whatever you want to call them, we know the United Nations has mused about forms of global carbon taxes. We know the IMF has mused about forms of global carbon taxes. And we also know the World Economic Forum has mused about different types of global carbon taxes.
Yeah, before he became prime minister, he had several jobs. He was the chairman of Brookfield Asset Management. He was also the UN ambassador for climate change, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I know for sure he was also the head of GFANZ, the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero. I'm here, and he was also the director of the World Economic Forum. I'm hearing World Economic Forum. I'm hearing GFANZ. I'm hearing someone who wants to socialize the economy, who wants to, make carbon pricing in everything. I'm not hearing a Canadian prime minister. I'm hearing someone who still thinks his job is to transform capitalism into, like you say, a managed economy. And he was so fluent with that BS. That's BS. I mean, he used, you know what word I know what his favorite word is now: catalyze.
Yeah.
Catalyze is a real word. It sort of means like alchemy, like to bring something together and create a change. It's sort of his go-to word to make things seem fancy and new and shiny, but he doesn't really know the answer. Oh, we'll catalyze the change. He must have said that half a dozen times there. I got a question for you, Franco. Is he a flim-flam man? Is he a BSer? Or is there actual meaning underneath it? Because, by the way, you can be a BSer to sneak something through, or you can be a BSer just because you're an imposter. You don't know what you're talking about. You just fake it till you make it. Is this fake it
Yeah.
till you make it, or is this sneaking in bad ideas under a fog of words?
Ezra, I just have to be honest with you. I don't know because, the first time I watched it, I told you I watched it a number of times before coming on with you here. It almost reminded me because I did economics in undergrad and through my master's as well, right? So I've also taken business courses and stuff like that. And on the one hand, I recognize terminology that we do have to be on the lookout for, right? I recognize expert terminology in there. We already mentioned the cross-border carbon mechanism, right? Like that is legitimate expert terminology, and it's just bureaucrat speak for global carbon taxes, right? So on the one hand, you recognize terminology of what an expert would say, but on the other hand, it kind of reminded me of like third year business school. My buddy who went out all weekend, who didn't actually prepare for his presentation, and then just using mumbo jumbo jargon to try to like get through the 10-minute presentation. So Ezra, I don't know. I honestly don't know which one it is.
I just Googled the word catalyze. I mean, I know what it means, but let me tell you what the Oxford Dictionary says: to cause or accelerate a reaction by acting as a catalyst. And then they give you the example: the enzyme catalyzes the oxidation of acetaldehyde. So it's like, it's a fancy way of saying transform and improve. So he used that word so often. I think that's a fake word, a fudge word, a word when he just it's sort of like that old Homer Simpson joke, step one, open a lemonade stand. Step two, question mark, question mark, question
Yeah,
mark. Step three, profit. Like it's
profit.
just his filler, it's his stopgap for when he doesn't know what to say. Oh, we'll catalyze that. Well, yeah, I mean, you're using a cool word that no one else uses, but maybe you're hiding that you don't have a bloody clue. There's one more thing he said, and I bet you know what these initials mean. He said the letters SDG. I don't know if you caught that, Franco. I know what that means because I follow the United Nations and their plans. Those are called the Sustainable Development Goals. He's got this jargon so secondhand. He's so used to talking to people at the UN or the World Economic Forum. That is a UN agenda. That's not a Canadian agenda. I don't think he's fully absorbed what it means to be Canada's prime minister. I think he still thinks he's a master of the universe who answers to the whole world. That's what the World Economic Forum is like. That's what the UN is like. If you're talking about SDGs, you're talking like you're a UN bureaucrat. You're not talking like you care about people in Barrie, Ontario, Cape Breton, Red Deer, Victoria. You sound like someone who is in Geneva or New York.
Ezra, you've been kind of to some of these conferences before, right? I've watched you do the interviews where you're walking and talking with people. So you would know more about this than I do. But like one of the issues is that these international bureaucrats, these international government bodies, one of the real issues is that they do have a ton of influence over, let's call it public policy back here in places like Canada or in other countries. But the accountability piece, is there any, Ezra? Like, is there any accountability over these international bureaucrats? Like, if there is, I don't really see it. Where there is some semblance of accountability left is with our own politicians, right? Or members of parliament. So even when they're talking to these international groups of elites, bureaucrats, businesses, they then have to come back here in Canada and try to implement these policies and at least try or at least show that they're kind of taking steps through the democratic process here. And that's where we fight it. Now, if there is a little bit of optimism here, Ezra, because look, I understand there's a lot of reasons for us to be pessimistic, but if there is some optimism, I think that's where we kind of have to fight these things, right? Is on the domestic front. There's a lack of accountability when you talk about these international organizations and bureaucracies. Where there is some accountability left is right here back home. So during the House of Commons parliamentary sessions, and why I say there is some optimism is because Mr. Carney still has to play the Democratic game, right? He still has to worry about getting elected. He still has to go to caucus meetings every Wednesday morning. And we've already seen that some pressure, they have already started to backtrack, whether that's the consumer carbon tax, right? Now, I'm sure they're going to continue to try to put in sneaky carbon tax, but we have seen some backtracking. We've seen at least a delay for a year on the gas and diesel vehicle sale ban by 2035. So there's still hope for Canadians to fight back against, some of these costly regulations and taxes.